But now, let's get into the reading. We're on chapter 3, about halfway through. This is a bit longer of a chapter. And I wear gloves, in case you don't know, because I have sweaty hands. I don't want to ruin my books. And they're also cute, I think. But I'm extra and have opera gloves instead. I don't have any other gloves. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. This is how practical I am. Okay. Reading Wuthering Heights, Volume 2. In the middle of Chapter 3, we see how Isabella has run away from Heathcliff. She's married to Heathcliff. Catherine has died. This is the same week that she has died. And she's telling Nellie about how she escaped. So we're at... So it's a story within a story, essentially. So on the outside story of what's happening is Nellie, otherwise known as Mrs. Dean, who is talking about the history of Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange to Mr. Lockwood, who's the new tenant of Thrushcross Grange, and Heathcliff. The older Heathcliff owns both of these properties. And Nellie is a servant who grew up with Heathcliff and Catherine and talks about their story, their narrative. And within this story, Isabella has just escaped the house that she is in with Heathcliff. And she largely does not like it because it was her being demoted in class. And so she ended up having to do more like manual labor and stuff, and she did not like that. So she also, along with many of the other characters, uses a lot of racialized language when talking about Heathcliff, not just about like how he has darker skin and hair, but also like using it in conjunction with descriptions of animals and being a devil, where it is very blatantly discriminatory. So that is why in the modern adaptation, or not modern, the latest adaptation of this movie, why like it could engage with interesting elements of race that many people were upset by, which I was as well, that Heathcliff was not a person of color, and that it forces us to have more, or we should be engaging with more of a decolonizing lens. Okay. Okay, so this is Isabella talking to Nellie. Yester evening, I sat in my nook reading some old books till late on towards 12. It seemed so dismal to go upstairs, with wild snow blowing outside, and my thoughts continually reverting to the kirkyard and the new-made grave. I dared hardly lift my eyes from the page before me, that melancholy scene so instantly usurped its place. Hindley sat opposite, his head leant on his hands, perhaps meditating on the subject. He had ceased drinking at a point below irrationality, and had neither stirred nor spoken during 2 or 3 hours. There was no sound through the house, but the moaning wind which shook the windows every now and then, the faint crackling of the coals, and the click of my snuffers as I removed at intervals the long wick of the candle. Hareton and Joseph were probably fast asleep in bed. It was very, very sad, and while I read, I sighed, for it seemed as if all joy had vanished from the world, never to be restored. The doleful silence was broken at length by the sound of the kitchen latch. Heathcliff had returned from his watch earlier than usual, owing, I suppose, to the sudden storm. That entrance was fastened, and we heard him coming round to get in by the other. I rose with an irrepressible expression of what I felt on my lips, which induced my companion, who had been staring towards the door, to turn and look at me.
I'll keep him out 5 minutes, he exclaimed. You won't object?
No, you may keep him out the whole night for me, I answered. Do put the key in the lock, and draw the bolts. Earnshaw accomplished this ere his guest reached the front door. He then came and brought his chair to the other side of my table, leaning over it, and searching in my eyes a sympathy with the burning hate that gleamed from his. As he both looked and felt like an assassin, he couldn't exactly find that, but he discovered enough to encourage him to speak.
You and I, he said, have each a great debt to settle with the man out yonder. If we were neither of us cowards, we might combine to discharge it. Are you as soft as your brother? Are you willing to endure to the last, and not once attempt a repayment?
I'm weary of enduring now, I replied, and I'll be glad of a retaliation that wouldn't recoil on myself. But treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies.
Treachery and violence are just a return for treachery and violence, cried Hindley.
Mrs. Heathcliff, I'll ask you to do nothing but sit still and be dumb. Tell me now, can you? I'm sure you would have as much pleasure as I in witnessing the conclusion of the fiend's existence. He'll be your death unless you overreach him, and he'll be my ruin. Damn the hellish villain. He knocks at the door as if he were master here already. Promise to hold your tongue, and before that clock strikes, it wants 3 minutes of 1. You're a free woman. He took the implements which I described to you in my letter from his breast, and would have turned down the candle. I snatched it away, however, and seized his arm. I'll not hold my tongue, I said. You mustn't touch him. Let the door remain shut and be quiet.
No, I've formed my resolution, and by God, I'll execute it, cried the desperate being. I'll do you a kindness in spite of yourself, inherit injustice, and you needn't trouble your head to screen me. Catherine is gone. Nobody alive would regret me or be ashamed, though I cut my throat this minute, and it's time to make an end.
I might as well have struggled with a bear or reasoned with a lunatic. That's, that's not a great way to be talking about mental health, but we're also being placed in a period of time. So, where mental health was not really prioritized. The only resource left me was to run to a lattice and warn his intended victim of the fate which awaited him. You'd better seek shelter somewhere else tonight, I exclaimed in a rather triumphant tone. Mr. Earnshaw has a mind to shoot you if you persist in endeavoring to enter.
You'd better open the door, he answered, addressing me by some elegant term that I don't care to repeat.
I shall not meddle in the matter, I retorted again. Come in and get shot, if you please. I've done my duty. With that, I shut the window and returned to my place by the fire, having too small a stock of hypocrisy at my command to pretend any anxiety for the danger that menaced him. Earnshaw swore passionately at me, affirming that I loved the villain yet, and calling me all sorts of names for the base spirit I evinced. And I, in my secret heart and conscience never reproached me, thought what a blessing it would be for him should Heathcliff put him out of misery, and what a blessing for me should he send Heathcliff to his right abode. As I sat nursing these reflections, the casement behind me was banged on to the floor by a blow from the latter individual, and his black countenance looked blightingly through. The stanchions stood too close to suffer his shoulders to follow. So this is Heathcliff coming in, again with the racialized language. And I smiled, exulting in my fancied security. His hair and clothes were whitened with snow, and his sharp cannibal teeth, revealed by cold and wrath, gleamed through the dark, which also is racialized language in calling him a cannibal, comparing him to be more animalistic than a man, even though he's just trying to get in the house.
Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent, he gurned, as Joseph called it. I cannot commit murder, I replied. Mr. Hindley stands sentinel with a knife and a loaded pistol. Let me in by the kitchen door, he answered. Hindley will be there before me, I answered. And that's a poor love of yours, and that cannot bear a shower of snow. We were left at peace in our beds, as long as the summer moon shone. Hi, buddy. He's making an announcement. Hello.
Okay.
Heathcliff, if I were you, I'd go stretch myself over her grave and die like a faithful dog. The world is surely not worth living in now, is it? You had distinctly impressed on me the idea that Catherine was the whole joy of your life. I can't imagine how you think of surviving her loss. He's there, is he? Exclaimed my companion, rushing to the gap. If I can get my arm out and I can hit him. I'm afraid, Ellen, you'll set me down as really wicked, but you don't know all, so don't judge. I wouldn't have aided or abetted an attempt on even his life for anything. Wish that he were dead, I must, and therefore I was fearfully disappointed and unnerved by terror for the consequences of my taunting speech, when he flung himself on Earnshaw's weapon and wrenched it from his grasp. The charge exploded, and the knife, in springing back, closed into its owner's wrist. Heathcliff pulled it away by main force, slitting up the flesh as it passed on, and thrust it dripping into his pocket. He then took a stone, struck down the division between the two windows, and sprung in. His adversary had fallen senseless with excessive pain, and the flow of blood that gushed from an artery or a large vein. Damn. The ruffian kicked and trampled on him. The ruffian. It's like the other guy was the one with the knife. And dashed his head repeatedly against the flags, holding me with one hand, meantime to prevent me summoning Joseph. He exerted preterhuman self-denial in abstaining from finishing him completely, but getting out of breath, he finally desisted and dragged the apparently inanimate body onto the settle. There he tore off the sleeves of Earnshaw's coat and bound up the wound with brutal roughness, spitting and cursing during the operation as energetically as he had kicked before. Being at liberty, I lost no time in seeking the old servant, who, having gathered by degrees the purport of my hasty tale, hurried below, gasping as he descended the steps two at once. What is there to do, na? What is there to do, na? There's this to do, thundered Heathcliff, that your master's mad, and should he last another month, I'll have him to an asylum. And how the devil did you come to fasten me out, you toothless hound? Don't stand muttering and mumbling there. Come, I'm not going to nurse him. Wash that stuff away, and mind the sparks of your candle. It is more than half brandy. And so ya been murthering on him? Exclaimed Joseph, lifting his hands and eyes in horror. If ever I seed a sight like this, may the Lord... Heathcliff gave him a push on his knees in the middle of the blood, and flung a towel to him. But instead of proceeding to dry it up, he joined his hands and began a prayer, which excited my laughter from its odd phraseology. I was in the condition of mind to be shocked at nothing. In fact, I was as reckless as some malefactors show themselves at the foot of the gallows. Oh, I forgot you, said the tyrant. You shall do that. Down with you. And you conspire with him against me, do you, viper? There, that is fit work for you. He shook me till my teeth rattled, and pitched me beside Joseph, who steadily concluded his supplications, and then rose, vowing he would set off for the Grange directly. Mr. Linton was magistrate, and though he had 50 wives dead, he should inquire into this. He was so obstinate in his resolution that Heathcliff deemed it expedient to compel from my lips a recapitulation of what had taken place, standing over me, heaving with malevolence, as I reluctantly delivered the account in answer to his questions. It required a great deal of labor to satisfy the old man that he was not the aggressor, especially with my hardly wrung replies.
However, Mr. Earnshaw soon convinced him that he was still alive. He hastened to administer a dose of spirits, and by their succor, his master presently regained motion and consciousness. Heathcliff, so he really beat the shit out of him. Damn. Heathcliff, aware that he was ignorant of the treatment received while insensible, called him deliriously intoxicated, and said he should not notice his atrocious conduct further, but advised him to get to bed. To my joy, he left us after giving this judicious counsel, and Hindley stretched himself on the hearthstone. I departed to my own room, marveling that I had escaped so easily. This morning, when I came down about half an hour before noon, Mr. Earnshaw was sitting by the fire, deadly sick. His evil genius, almost as gaunt and ghastly, leaned against the chimney. Neither appeared inclined to dine, and having waited till all was cold on the table, I commenced alone. Nothing hindered me from eating heartily, and I experienced a certain sense of satisfaction and superiority, as at intervals I cast a look towards my silent companions, and felt the comfort of a quiet conscience within me. After I had done, I'd ventured on the unusual liberty of drawing near the fire, going round Earnshaw's seat, and kneeling in the corner beside him. Heathcliff did not glance my way, and I gazed up, and contemplated his features almost as confidently as if they had been turned to stone. His forehead, that I once thought so manly, that I now think so diabolical, was shaded with a heavy cloud. His basilisk eyes were nearly quenched by sleeplessness, and weeping, perhaps, for the lashes were wet then. His lips, devoid of their ferocious sneer, and sealed in an expression of unspeakable sadness. Had it been another, I would have covered my face in the presence of such grief. In his case, I was gratified. And ignoble as it seems to insult a fallen enemy, I couldn't miss the chance of sticking in a dart. His weakness was the only time when I could taste the delight of paying wrong for wrong. Fie, miss, I interrupted. One might suppose you had never opened a Bible in your life. If God afflicts your enemies, surely that ought to suffice you. It is both mean and presumptuous to add your torture to his. In general, I'll allow that it would be, Ellen, she continued, but what misery laid on Heathcliff could content me, unless I have a hand in it. I'd rather he suffered less, if I might cause his sufferings, and he might know that I was the cause. Wow, there are such toxic people in this book. But, I mean, if she is also being abused, then, her getting revenge makes sense and is valid. Oh, I owe him so much. On only one condition can I hope to forgive him. It is, if I may take an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, for every wrench of agony, return a wrench, reduce him to my level. As he was the first to injure, make him the first to implore pardon. And then, why then, Ellen, I might show you some generosity, but it is utterly impossible I can ever be revenged, and therefore I cannot forgive him. Hindley wanted some water, and I handed him a glass, and asked him how he was. Not as ill as I wish, he replied, but leaving out my arm, every inch of me is as sore as if I'd been fighting with a legion of imps. Yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you, for fear of offending her. It's well people don't really rise from their grave, or last night she might have witnessed a repulsive scene. Are you not bruised and cut over your chest and shoulders? I can't say, he answered, but what do you mean? Did he dare to strike me when I was down? He trampled on and kicked you and dashed you on the ground, I whispered, and his mouth watered to tear you with his teeth, because he's only half a man, not so much. Mr. Earnshaw looked up like me to the countenance of our mutual foe, who, absorbed in his anguish, seemed insensible to anything around him. The longer he stood, the plainer his reflections revealed their blackness through his features. Again, the racialized language and talking about him. Oh, if God would give me but strength to strangle him in my last agony, I'd go to hell with joy, groaned the impatient man, writhing to rise, and sinking back in despair, convinced of his inadequacy for the struggle. Nay, it's enough that he has murdered one of you, I observed aloud. At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now, had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. That's rude to put on him. After all, it is preferable to be hated than loved by him. When I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was before he came, I'm fit to curse the day. Most likely, Heathcliff noticed more the truth of what was said than the spirit of the person who said it. His attention was roused, I saw, for his eyes rained down tears among the ashes, and he drew his breath in suffocating sighs. I stared full at him and laughed scornfully. The clouded windows of hell flashed a moment towards me. The fiend, which usually looked out, however, was so dimmed and drowned that I did not fear to hazard another sound of derision.
"Get up and be gone out of my sight," said the mourner.
I guess he uttered those words, at least, though his voice was hardly intelligible. "I beg your pardon," I replied, "but I loved Catherine too, and her brother requires attendance, which, for her sake, I shall supply. Now that she's dead, I see her in Hindley. Hindley has exactly her eyes. If you had not tried to gouge them out and made them black and red, and her... well, maybe you shouldn't have locked him outside."
"Get up, wretched idiot, before I stamp you to death," he cried, making a movement that caused me to make one also.
"But then," I continued, holding myself ready to flee, "if poor Catherine had trusted you and assumed the ridiculous, contemptible, degrading title of Mrs. Heathcliff, she would soon have presented a similar picture. She wouldn't have borne your abominable behavior quietly. Her detestation and disgust must have found voice." The back of the settle and Earnshaw's person interposed between me and him, so instead of endeavoring to reach me, he snatched a dinner knife from the table and flung it at my head. It struck beneath my ear and stopped the sentence I was uttering, but pulling it out, I sprang to the door and delivered another, which I hope went a little deeper than his missile. Damn. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. This is a longer chapter. Okay. That's going to be it for me today, but thank you for being here. We'll be talking more about deconstructing patriarchy through queerness and gender fluidity tomorrow. Okay. Thank you for being here. It was nice chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your evening, wherever you are, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.